Welcome to Troubleshooting Innovation, a commercial baking podcast, sponsored by Oaks. Worldwide since 1946, Oaks is your partner for mixing and depositing process solutions in commercial baking. I'm your host, Joanie Spencer, Editor-in-Chief of Commercial Baking, and I'm spending this season with Marc and Elana Schulman, the second and third generations of leadership at Chicago-based Eli's Cheesecake. We are exploring innovation, growth, longevity, and resilience through the eyes of a family-owned bakery. In this episode, we discover how setting a standard of distinction can impact a bakery's identity and product development strategies. Hi, Marc and Elana. Thanks for joining me again this week.
Thank you. Very happy to be back.
Okay, so last week we talked about the point when the cheesecake became its own entity beyond a dessert in a restaurant. What was it about the product? When did you guys know that Eli had something special with this cheesecake?
I think that first taste of Chicago and the lines of, the excitement and the interest and the goodwill, I'd say we hit an interesting time, in the mid 80s where supermarkets for the first time were really interested in premium quality foods. There was really a vacuum in the market for super premium as it applied to cheesecake. I think between the goodwill that Eli had in restaurants, fellow restaurant operators in Chicago, national restaurant chains, and then in retail, that it really gave us some opportunities to grow the business. And I think the great thing about cheesecake and desserts, and this has expanded over that long history, there are a lot of places that desserts are sold where maybe they weren't sold when we started, consumer direct or other ways. So I think, the number one thing is you have to make great product. I think we're in an industry, where every once in a while people become diet conscious and no one wants to waste calories today. So really everybody has to say, hey, that cake, that dessert was phenomenal. So we started with the philosophy of always make it great, and then really followed our customers and people came to us. And it's been really exciting, ever since. And along the way, we got many more resources and, product development and commercialization and training, but we never lost the focus on the quality of the product and the importance of each slice.
Yeah. I think there's a point in the history of how consumers use grocery stores and sort of the onset of the trend of an in-store bakery. An item in a supermarket bakery isn't less than. There's no reason why you can't have a good, high-quality product that's accessible. I feel like Eli is coming out of the restaurant and being widely available to consumers probably played a big role in that.
Oh, absolutely. We see the term authenticity used a lot today. And at the same time, you see a lot of brands that are, made up, or maybe it is someone's, grandmother's recipe, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think we were very fortunate to have the continuity and, the fact, actually, we were on a call today talking about Taste of Chicago, which usually is around July 4th, and this year is in September. But, hey, we've been at every Taste of Chicago since 1980. You look at the big cakes we've done dating back to 1987. So it's just such a amazing history, both in the product side and the range of the products, but just who and what Eli's is. And I think the fact that, Chicago's our home and we have such a great history here of involvement is really just, given us even more scale and support to grow the business.
And I also think, it was like my grandfather, when he developed this recipe, he was a real rule breaker. And it's a recipe that's very, very unique to him and to our business. And it is Chicago style. And I also feel like that's really important. It's like that wasn't necessarily a style of cheesecake that people were making at home.
Right, right. And so that's a good segue, Elana. That was my next question. This has a distinction. It has become the Chicago style of cheesecake as opposed to, say, a New York style of cheesecake. And there are certain products. In fact, the last issue of Commercial Baking, we featured a bun bakery that is known for the Chicago style hot dog bun. So a person can look at like a Chicago style pizza or a Chicago dog and really recognize it as distinctly Chicago. What is it about a Chicago style of cheesecake? And specifically, of course, Eli's cheesecake. What are the traits that set it apart?
So, Chicago style cheesecake has a few key unique features. But first, I would say is traditionally cheesecake is baked in a water bath. And so my grandfather did a dry hot bake. So the batter and crust is going right in the oven. There's no water. He did it at a really high temperature. So you get this beautiful caramelization on the exterior, and then it sort of souffles and you get a really rich and creamy texture on the interior. The other thing that he did, which is the crust. So, you might see more traditionally like a graham cracker crust being used, and Eli did an all butter shortbread cookie crust. So at night at Eli's, we have an amazing team of cookie bakers that are sheeting shortbread, baking it off, that gets cooled, and then the batter's deposited in the morning and the cakes are baked. And that product on its own, it's like its own dessert. It's delicious, just classic shortbread cookie. So that would be the next thing. And then, the ingredients are pretty simple in a cheesecake. So it really comes down to the quality of those ingredients. So we use slow cultured cream cheese, slow cultured sour cream. We use Nielsen Massey Madagascar vanilla. That's another family owned business in Illinois, really high quality vanilla. We call it liquid gold. And so all of those elements really create a very unique flavor profile. And then I will say too, I think our desserts in general are very, very balanced in terms of sweetness. So the first thing that you get on your palate is not sugar. You're really tasting all of those different elements. So the vanilla, the slow cultured dairy, obviously sweetness as well. But I would say it's a more sort of balanced eating experience.
Okay, I was thinking when you were talking about the slow cultured, I imagine that really creates a depth of the flavor.
Yes. And I would say too, texturally, Chicago style cheesecake is very, very different than other styles of cheesecake. It's really rich and creamy. It's almost like eating ice cream, whereas other styles are a little heavier, a little more dense, a little grittier, and ours is very different in that way.
Okay. And Marc, when you were talking about hearing from people who said, when they first tried an Eli's cheesecake I think this is a good point to interject that I too remember the first time I experienced an Eli's cheesecake, and it did truly ruin cheesecake for me. Like I can't accept anything else really. It's a very memorable experience to have an Eli's cheesecake for the first time.
Well, we thank you, and that's really why we have a lot to live up to every day. As we say to our people, the most important cake is the dessert you bake today. It's a premium product. Our goal is not to make the cheapest. Its goal is to make the best. And I think as that cheesecake has evolved into many flavors, but also so many other desserts, that we really are we want to be held to that same standard of quality.
Yeah. Okay. So this is another good segue. Let's talk about setting standards and being authentic and still innovating. So Eli's is known as the standard setter. You defined the Chicago style, but also, as Elana mentioned, Eli was sort of a rule breaker. So you have this reputation of doing amazing things and different things with a classic dessert. How are you able to get so innovative for so many years?
I think, one great thing that we all got from my father, I think, as food service operators, is just learn and become as much of a subject matter expert, travel, see opportunities, and just give really great service. So I think the great thing of being a family business is there's really no limits. People will ask, well, what's the goal? If you're a publicly traded company or private equity owned, sometimes it's easier. Our goal is really to be the best at what we do and to use all of our resources and all of the skill that our long-term associates have. So after all that time, you just see the good that we could create and then working together. And our industry was an industry which at one point I'd say there was ease of entry. If you had an oven and a pan, you could make cheesecake and desserts. Doesn't work that way anymore with all the regulation at the federal level or to SQF. So, we're held to a high standard, but we've always wanted to create a culture of quality and food safety. And I think when you have that going for you, one, it's caused us to innovate the flavors of cheesecake, but also over those years, it caused us to just go into many other categories of desserts, serving maybe the needs of a specific channel like the airline business, that all of a sudden, your development, you maybe used your core skill sets, but it was a different shape or a different product that would work for that customer.
Okay, so tell me this. What's the sweet spot innovating and coming up with cool new products, a variety of different flavors, and getting really inventive while also holding on to your authenticity? What's the secret?
Well, I think they really go hand in hand because, there have been opportunities where, maybe the volume was high, but, we didn't feel it really fit within what we were able to do. So I think, being structured and focused at the same time, I think the growth and maybe, years ago when we started to sell, back then it was Borders, which, was a book chain in their cafes. So all of a sudden there were accessory products to the cheesecake they needed. And that was sort of a big step along the way. So cream cheese is clearly a major ingredient, but we work with so many other ingredients and ways to do things. And I'd say, desserts, maybe it goes a little more over. Sometimes some desserts can be consumed at breakfast. I know we like to eat cheesecake, round the clock, but,
Of course.
I think that, the skill sets there, or when other, Culvers came along and said, we'd like you to make bite-sized cheesecake pieces, and we never did it before. And you go, hey, that could be good. So you got to listen. I mean, I think sometimes a business, and maybe in the world today, you could say, look, we only want to make two things, and we want to have this plant, and we want, 10 people working in it. It's all going to be automated, and every dessert will look exactly the same. Maybe you change a flavor, but that's it. Well, that's not what we're about. If you come to our bakery, everything other than the tunnel oven is pretty much on wheels, and it's all about flexibility for the future and for our customers. So I think that's been another defining characteristic.
And I think, I've watched this with both of my parents, but they really always say yes to everything. They're very optimistic. They're big thinkers, very positive. And I think that has a huge impact on the culture and the culture of innovation here. And so when an opportunity comes up to maybe think differently about a product line or introduce something new, I think people are excited by it. And we have such a good team of people where it's like we feel like okay, this could be pushing us and our capabilities, but because we have this great team of people, we feel like we can tackle it together. That makes a big difference.
This episode of Troubleshooting Innovation is sponsored by Oaks, dedicated to serving the R&D requirements for customers by creating an easy and accurate transition from lab to production. Bakers can visit Oaks' R&D lab in person or virtually to run their own custom product trials with Oaks' equipment. Head to www.oaks.com. That's www.oakes.com to learn more.
Do you think that the fact that you are Eli's lineage, that it enables you to say yes a little bit easier and try different things because you inherently know what the authenticity is supposed to be? So you have that ability to kind of get outside of the box without straying too far from your core?
I think the fact that we can do what we want to do when we want to do it and still believe who we are is very important. I've been in meetings, or you can talk to people in the investment community, and it's like, okay, like, what's that big thing that's going to, make your brand huge? Because a lot of times for capital, people are like, you need to raise a lot of money, but you need to give these huge estimates of the potential. So we're more conservative that way, but it also depends who the customer is. We found over the years that our business went from being very transactional to much more relationship. And so if you're working with long-time customer partners, you're much more willing to say, okay, we'll take that step out because they know us for our quality and it's going to be worthwhile to make the investment. And then if we do make the investment and do that new product, well, then we have an opportunity to sell it in maybe another different form to other customers. So they sort of go together. But, I think, and then, you also have to be careful that you can just, as Elana said, we always say yes, but, sometimes in a timely basis, you're working on, 10 major projects. You might have to say, the 11th and the 12th have to wait a little while because you could overload your people in your system. So, you have to be reasonable as well.
And then I think the other interesting thing is I've heard this term come up recently a lot, neo-nostalgia. And I feel like that is sort of like that sweet spot for us where, obviously we have this product that we've made for a long time and it's part of the heritage of our brand. But also we really think about innovation a lot, but also innovation in like an accessible way. So I think that there's a lot of fun to play around with a format maybe someone knows, but a new and exciting flavor, or a flavor that they're familiar with, but presented in a new way. And so that's where I get really, really excited. And I feel like we have a lot of people in the building that are interested in sort of pushing and trying different formats, but maybe using some of the elements of like products we've been doing for 43 years. It's a great combination.
So that's like the cuties.
Yeah, the cuties. We also launched, this was like out of the pandemic, we launched a product called Pie in the Sky, which launched on United. And so that's a mini chocolate chip cookie pie filled with chocolate ganache, warmed on board. And that was something that, we had done mini pies, but more kind of traditional pie fillings. And then that came around and kind of went away. And then it was like, hey, why don't we try sort of like a new take on a chocolate chip cookie? That's like everyone's favorite classic dessert, but it's presented in this new format that someone maybe hasn't had. And so that's where I feel like you can be so creative sometimes when there's actually a lot of sort of like restrictions, or literally like you have this piece of equipment, what can you do with it? Someone might think that there's not a lot you can do, but when you get people around the table to really think about Like, is there another application that we're not thinking of? Is there a new dessert format? So many ideas come from that process.
Yeah. And, I completely hear what you're saying because I do have this belief that if you understand what the rules are and you understand the parameters, that actually gives you so much freedom to bend the rules or get creative inside of those parameters because you know where you're supposed to be going, right?
Exactly.
Okay, I want to talk about quality for a minute. It's something that you guys have mentioned several times, and it's Eli's heritage. I've heard stories of Eli back in the day kind of walking through the plant and doing a literal white glove test. Is that true?
Diana Moles, our senior vice president of innovation, started Eli's when she was 18. And she always tells me the story that she was at the bakery on Dakin and they were doing turtle that day. And Eli showed up and he was coming from the restaurant and he pointed and he said, "What's the weight of pecans you're putting on that cake?" And she said a number. And then the person next to her said, "That's not right." Eli, he knew exactly what the bottom line should be. He had his eye on every part of the operation. I think that you can tell a good restaurateur by that. Like, they see everything that's going on at every time.
Yeah.
One of Elana's favorite movies is Casino with and what's his name? When he's in the casino with the blueberries.
Oh, Sam Rothstein.
Okay, so Eli was like Sam Rothstein. It's like, but hey, growing up in the restaurant business and watching, Eli who did it all, the meat, the quality of the liver, I mean, his produce, and actually, Cheesecake came around because he couldn't find a dessert that he was proud to serve at his restaurant. So, yeah, I think our menu at Eli's A Place for Steak said, we'll serve good food at a profit if we can, at a loss if we must, always good food. So I think that really has been drilled in our heads for a long time. I mean, the good news is, if you stand for quality and you don't cut corners, we've seen things when other people in the industry are saying, now using real cream cheese or real vanilla. Well, what were they using before? So, I think, and then the other thing is, we're not going to be the cheapest. And I think one of the challenges of cheesecake and desserts, they're expensive, chocolate, sour cream, cream cheese, butter, are items that certainly are costly, but clearly, the amazing thing is you see inflation across the board. I think, at the first Taste of Chicago, we probably sold a slice of cheesecake for $2 or $2.50. Today, you see desserts $10, $12 a slice. You see single serve price have gone up, but what are the costs? What's the cost of labor? What's the cost of cream cheese or the other things that go with it? But I think the good news is customers want quality. I think today individuals, either they'll pay more to get the better product or they won't consume the product. So, we're going to lose out to someone says, hey, I just want it to be the cheapest, most automated way to make the dessert. And that's just not what we do.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, from our side, there are the labor costs and the impact of inflation on ingredient costs. There is supply chain disruption that's impacting the cost of the equipment. Like, there's so much more that goes into it, but the consumer doesn't see that. A lot of them, they don't care. They don't need to hear the whole backstory. They want to know, if I'm paying this much for it, I want it to be worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Quality always wins. And I think the benefit that we have clearly is doing it for the number of years, having the expertise, having the drive for the future. We see it as being a really exciting time. And clearly today, the channels that we sell to all are growing. Some didn't grow during COVID, others have come back, but we see a lot of demand, and then that inspires us to continue to invest in our people and in our facility.
Yeah, yeah. And Eli's cheesecake at retail is not cheap, but it's worth it.
Thank you. You take it one customer at a time. And that's really the exciting part of, having an online presence. When we started, there really was no such thing as, overnight shipping or second day. And clearly over the years, people's comfort in ordering foods direct has just grown. So
Yeah.
the great news is, you can hear us on the air today and get an Eli's, the next day, anywhere in the country. And I think if you look at like Goldbelly, which is a customer of ours, of taking great regional foods, making it available across a lot of categories. So I think consumers are much more demanding, and also restaurant operators who say, hey, I really, I don't want a private label cheesecake. I want Eli's.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's a good point that sparks a thought for me, and that is your marketing efforts, especially hearing that Goldbelly is a customer. This product really speaks for itself. I mean, we sort of opened with the fact that you set the standard for a Chicago style, but how have your marketing efforts sort of helped put Eli's on the map so that someone can get on Goldbelly's website and order an Eli's cheesecake to be sent to them? And I guess I specifically want to call out Maureen's incredible efforts because she has done a fantastic job with your publicity. So how do those two concepts go hand in hand? The notoriety of the product and your marketing efforts?
Well, I'd say I'm very fortunate to be Eli's son and to be married to Maureen, our publicist and writer and storyteller, and to have Elana as a daughter, because this summer we've had a archivist at Eli's going through our photos and all these big cakes and celebrities. Eli was just such a character and a host, and that goes back to the 40s. You think about the photo of Eli with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., at Eli's, the watch, the Cartier watch that Frank and Barbara Sinatra gave my father that I wear now. Bill Clinton visiting our bakery in 1992 and those inaugural cakes. I mean, there are just so many things that have gone on. But the exciting thing is I think Elana said earlier, we probably never said no. I know, Joanie, we talked earlier about something we did over the summer when NASCAR came to Chicago for the first time, and it was welcomed with this 500-pound Eli's cheesecake. So, but I think they all sort of add up. Part of it's doing the right thing. Part of it is being out there. And then out of it, you get your own style of cheesecake.
Yeah.
I think telling the story, and, we're in an industry, there's some great companies. We have a lot of respect, for Juniors. It's a great New York style cheesecake, and the Rosen family's done a great job and their history. And, we go ahead and have built on our history. And I think the important thing is, through all of our activities, both in the bakery, in the community, and big cakes, we're creating history every day, and that it's really building a far better future. And I don't think you ever want to be in the situation what we see as big brands say, oh, we want to do something next month. What can we do? And it's very, they're only doing it for a limited amount of time. They're doing it because, well, we have to give. When customers come and, we talk about Eli's history, what we've done both between events, big cakes, partnerships, it's just what we do. I don't think we would ever run our company any differently than we do. So it's like, wow, hey, Eli's is great. And then that makes our work more fun, because we're telling a story and we're making a difference in the community and we're working to do the right thing for our people. So I think out of it all, you have a path for success for the future.
I love that. I love that. And I do think that you balance that so well, because it's one thing to be doing great things, but at the same time, people need to know that you're doing great things. And so I think that you carry that balance quite successfully. So these are all my questions for this episode, you guys. Next week, though, I want to take a look a little bit into the day-to-day of how Eli's cheesecakes are made in terms of who's making them. So Eli's is known for some pretty unique and foundational workforce development practices. And so I'm very excited to dive into these, because I think that you and your team have put together something really special in how you treat your workforce and how you develop your workers. And I think it's something that our industry could greatly benefit from learning about. So I can't wait for next week. But for today, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Troubleshooting Innovation, and a special thanks to this season's sponsor, Oaks, your partner for mixing and depositing process solutions since 1946. Visit www.oaks.com. That's www.oakes.com to learn more about Oaks' R&D lab, equipment rental, and more.